Some births arrive quietly, while others are wrapped in mystery. A baby born in a veil of an unbroken sac, a cord curled around the baby's neck, skin marked by a white wax. Today, we explore the stories of children born with anomalies, uncut births, umbilical cord presentations, vnix skin, physical differences that stir wonder and start the ancestors and the old people in your family wanting to perform rituals around your child. The first birth that we're going to talk about is the uncut birth. So, an uncut birth occurs when a baby is born still enclosed in the amniotic sac. It's a rare happening. It happens in fewer than 1 in 8,000 births. It's a medical thing, right? But spiritually, these children, especially in African culture, um, they believe that these children, the amniotic sac is an indication of an ancestral calling or a spiritual invitation to become a healer, right? In fact, this is exactly what is applicable to me. So those of you who have been here, you guys know that I used to be a sangoma, and in fact, I was identified to be a healer upon birth because I was born like this. So I've inserted a picture for you guys to see what I'm talking about. If you are a sensitive viewer, I apologize, but I need to insert these pictures so that you guys have a clear understanding of what it is that I'm talking about. Secondly, you're going to see that in the pictures that I have included here, there aren't a lot of African children because African people do not take these pictures of children born under these conditions because they're considered to be sacred. Um, and I digress a little bit. So I was actually saying that this is exactly how I was born. I had an uncalled birth. So I came out with the amniotic sac still very much intact. And the story goes that prior to my birth, in fact, the next door neighbor who was said to be a witch, this is at my grandmother's house, um, she was insistent that she's going to be present at my birth because back in those days, I'm about to reveal how old I am. You had the option of giving birth at home. So you had the option of either going to the hospital or giving birth at home. So the next door neighbor was apparently very insistent with regard to she's going to be present when I am born. She was said to be a witch. She's no longer alive. However, my grandmother, who's also now since passed, tells the story about um a lady who used to go to the St. John Church. So you guys know this song. If you're in South Africa, you know the St. John Church that I'm talking about, where they wear blue and white and they have dipala. They call it dipala. Where they will walk down the street, they will play the instruments and they will play church music. So there was a lady who used to have a church like that on my grandmother's street. And that lady also came to my grandmother and said to my grandmother, this child better not be born at home. So there was always this talk around surrounding my birth, even prior to me being born. So fast forward to me being born, I am born and I am presenting with this amniotic sac. All right. So already there's this clear indication of this is a special child, this is a special child, this is a child that was called by the ancestors. So of course you now understand where my journey began with this whole ancestral calling. It literally began at birth. Um and to my understanding, there were certain ceremonies, dedication ceremonies that were performed while I was young, to dedicate me to the spirits of the dead. And I know this how. I know this because I have also then experienced it subsequently as a sangoma when I was practicing, that people would come into my practice because a child was born in this particular way. The second birth that we're talking about is the umbilical cord presentation. So this is a child who presents with the umbilical cord around either their neck or across their body. All right. In fact, this is apparently very common. It occurs in nearly 1/3 of all the births. So your child will come with the umbilical cord either around their neck or tied across their body. But in African culture, they believe that if this happens, pati uzelumbete, meaning that there's already ancestral calling on you. All right, you would understand that it would resemble the cord around your neck or across the body resembles the beads of an ancestor, that resembles the beads of a healer. So already you are identified as a person who would have a spiritual calling upon their lives. The third one is the vnix skin. So this is a thick layer of white skin that would be around the child's body. It's very dry and it peels off, right? It comes off over a period of time. And this again is also considered to be a veil. It's considered to be a white veil over the child, and it carries a lot of ancestral energy. And they believe that this is also an identification for the child who is a healer. And then the fourth one is a child who is born with physical anomalies. So it would be an extra finger, extra toes, or an unusual birthmark. This is said to signify ubizo, which is a calling from their ancestors, because these kids are said to be equipped, so they are given much more than they can handle. Hence they are given extra fingers, or they're going to travel more than the normal person would travel. Hence they're given extra toes, right? And this all is an indication of what? Of ancestral calling. What am I saying to you guys? This is what I'm saying. This is not unusual. In fact, even in the Bible we hear about um I think it's Jeremiah. It's Jeremiah 1:5, where the Bible talks about the Lord knowing you before he placed you in your mother's womb, right? So the Lord knowing you before placing you in your mother's womb is a clear indication that if a child is born with these particular things, it does not necessarily mean that this is an ancestral calling. Guys, you know, I do this channel because I'm trying to warn you against um dedicating yourselves and your children honestly to ancestral worship, right? um because it's in African culture, these things, like I said, they're not spoken about. You only get to find these things out when it's happening to you. When your child is born and your child is presented like this, then all of a sudden there are these aunties who are now speaking to you about there needs to be a traditional ceremony that needs to happen for this child because this child was born in this particular way. What am I saying to you? Even if your child is born with all of these things present in them, you do not need to perform any traditional ceremony. You do not dedicate your children to the spirits of the dead. The Lord knows your child. The Lord has identified your child. The Lord is well aware. In fact, there is a prolific preacher, and I'm going to tell you who it is. I know he's a bit controversial now, but in the beginning, he never used to be controversial. So I know right now he's synonymous for um what do you guys call it, neo prosperity preaching, but he never used to be like that in the beginning. This is Bishop TD Jakes. Bishop TD Jakes speaks about a story where his mother speaks about him being born with a veil over his face, and you guys know how prolific TD Jakes is. Hands down, you know his delivery is very prolific, and he's had success because of his prolific delivery. So I am not saying that a child who's born with these anomalies is not special. I perfectly understand that in most cases, these children are special. A lot of these kids actually grow up to be doctors and nurses, right? So I understand the thinking behind African spirituality. A lot of the children that are born with what is it now, with the first thing that I identified, the one that I said I was born with, the veil, right? A lot of those people actually do have spiritual prophetic gifts. So I am not saying that this is not a presentation of the spiritual gift. What I'm saying is that African culture distorts the spirituality. What I'm saying to you is performing these African traditions and committing your children to the spirits of the dead will contaminate the spiritual gift that your child was born with. What I'm saying is that if your child is spiritually gifted, you do not need to do anything in order to activate the spiritual gift. You know this how? You know this because of the story of John the Baptist. John the Baptist is said to have lived in his mother's womb when Mary, which is Jesus's mother, was pregnant with Jesus. John the Baptist leapt. John the Baptist is the one that was foretelling of Jesus. And the Bible never speaks about John the Baptist being taken to some initiation ceremony to activate his gift. So what I'm saying is that if you have a prophetic gift, you will prophesy. Nobody needs to slaughter a cow. You do not need to drink the blood of a goat. What I'm saying is that if your child is presenting with cords around their neck, your child may very well grow up to be a doctor. Your child does not need to go to Sangoma initiation or any type of initiation. That is what I'm trying to bring to your attention. So what am I saying to you? You must refuse vehemently. Guys, this thing of me being a Sangoma has wreaked havoc in my life. It's created such problems for me that I'm literally having to fight battles day in and day out. The last thing you want to do as a parent is create these kind of problems for your child when you know, because I am telling you, do not allow your child to undergo any form of ceremony because they are presenting in these particular instances that I have indicated to you. Allow your child to grow up, and then whatever spiritual gift that is supposed to manifest in your child's life will manifest all by itself. You do not need to help God. God can do it all by himself. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.